Hey, how you doing, guys? For this week's topic, we're going to talk about power supplies. Something like this, which is a power supply for Canon XF100, but this applies to any external power supply. Before I get into generally, I'm going to talk about specifically. This power supply actually went out, and the reason why I'm making this topic, and kind of reason why I chose the Canon X or the Canon C100 because I was looking for another camera to complement my XF100 in a multicam situation. Also, I want to choose a different camera for a different reason, low light and other things I'm not really going to get into. But it also happens to use exactly the same power supply and also batteries. And this particular power supply doesn't come cheap. It's about $150, which why I'm kind of crying about it. And so I can use both the power supply and batteries as a backup to both cameras because they're interchangeable. And obviously, I think these are a great feature. Not only can it run the camera, you can recharge your battery as well. You can't do both at the same time, unfortunately. Now, as far as generally with power supplies, anytime you have a power supply plugged in, it's always running. And this is whether or not it's plugged into the item you're trying to power up, or if that device is turned on and off, doesn't matter. It's always running 24/7 as long as you have it plugged into the power outlet. And of course, I'm talking about this right here, depending, of course, what country you're from. So it does plug in this way. So yeah. Now, which is the reason why on most, I'm not saying all stuff, but something like this is very expensive. If I'm not using it, I will actually unplug that power supply because I've had lots of power supplies go out, and not particularly I've had that device or product for many years. In fact, there's some that I only bought for maybe a year or two, and the power supplies go out and the product works fine, just simply because having it plugged in just eventually fails, and that's it's normal. In fact, this Canon one lasted about 8 years at least that I know of, as long as I had the camera, which is actually very good. But I've forgotten as well that I've actually left it plugged in for very long periods of time. And I think by unplugging it, you will maybe add a few years of life to that power supply. I'm not talking about internal ones, but external. But of course, there is a big debate on whether or not um, leaving device on all the time or shutting it on and off, because many people are arguing that turning a device on and off will cause thermal expansion inside the device and or power supply, causing bad solder joints. Now, I do have extensive training in electronics, and most of the stuff that I have repair was actually due to bad solder joints, which is called by thermal expansion and contraction, turning the item on and off, and generally. So it does happen. So you have to decide for yourself. You know, for instance, like, well, there's also an argument for convenience. I mean, some things that you use so often, it makes sense to just leave it plugged in, and like routers and other things, because obviously they'd be inconvenience. You use it so much throughout the day, then it makes no sense to unplug it. Now, for some items that you're only use maybe 3 or 4 times a week on a regular basis, or even a little bit more than that, it makes sense to maybe unplug it entirely, including the power supply. Um, so you kind of have to debate on what's best. Um, for you. Like I said, if it's something you use all the time, 24 hours a day, then obviously leave it plugged in. On more expensive items like something like this, I would probably unplug it if you're not using it at the time, because it's simply always going to be running. Not unless that particular power supply happens to have an on and off switch. That's a different situation. But I thought I'd throw that in there for a topic which is kind of interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you guys later.